Hey, this is Tom Glavine, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on The Grueling Truth.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham here on the Grueling Truth Network. It's been another week, and the best thing I can say about the last week is that baseball has finally started again. All is right with the world, as we've mentioned on several occasions. Graham, how you doing? I know baseball started for you, too.
Yeah, man. High school season is kind of getting into full swing. We had preseason last week and first week of games this week. I've got pretty much my 3 days off of work all consist of being on the baseball field. So can't complain too much, but a doubleheader today in Florida, it's still pretty I'm a little bit roasted, or as a well done lobster, as you like to put it, before we came on the air.
You are a little red today. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it, and we're going to put the ball in play and start talking about probably one of the stranger stories that you're going to hear on Out of Left Field, which is strange for a show called Out of Left Field, but this one actually came out of left field.
This came out of the practice field, left field. Like, this wasn't even in the damn stadium. I think this came off of like the rehab field.
So the Cubs have recently said that they are now done with Sammy Sosa. They'll not be inviting him to any events. They'll not be even acknowledging his existence, which is crazy for a guy who was an all-star 7 times, played nearly a decade, I think a decade for the Cubs. Almost all of his all-star seasons were with the Cubs, and who was involved in that home run race in 1998 against Mark McGwire. Now, things started going downhill with Sammy Sosa and the Cubs immediately. He didn't show up to the last game of the 2004 season. He just walked out. He had some issues with the ownership. They've been kind of going back and forth for years. But the biggest deal is, I think, that they've kind of shunned him based on the accusations, the allegations that there was some performance-enhancing drug use on the part of Sammy Sosa. And Sammy Sosa said in several interviews that there's no case against him, that there's no evidence that he used performance-enhancing drugs, except for the dynamic increase in his performance. But then he said something that really kind of caught us all off balance. What exactly did he say, Graham?
Well, I'm starting to feel like there's just a lot of religious talk happening, because we had Adnan on, and then we had Aubrey Huff, and we discussed his story, and there were some religious elements to Aubrey Huff's story, and obviously that was our whole show with Adnan. And yet, apparently, out of all those things, I didn't know that it seems like maybe Aubrey Huff was talking to Sammy Sosa, because Sosa, defending himself against all the accusations that, as you said, the home run streak and all of his high offensive production numbers were aided by PEDs, he said, and I'm surprisingly having to quote this, "It's like Jesus Christ when he came to Jerusalem. Everybody thought Jesus Christ was a witch, and he was our Savior. So if they talk crap about Jesus Christ, what about me? Are you kidding me?" End quote. Now, I ask all of you who are about to put the palm of your hand onto your head to not do it so hard that you concuss yourselves, but let's all take a moment and just have that face palm moment where, what in the heck was Sosa giving and talking about? So give us 2 seconds. Okay, I have removed my palm from my head, yet I still don't really know, Chris, what in the hell Sammy Sosa was trying to say.
Well, I think he has a point. If his goal was to prove that he is a blathering idiot, then he has a perfect point. Of course, if his goal was to prove that he didn't use PEDs or that the Cubs should give him a second chance, I think he blew it.
Well,
I have no
I
idea
mean,
what he's
yeah,
talking
it certainly doesn't seem. I mean, like you said, the Cubbies pretty much put the kibosh on anything happening after this, but it's just been really kind of odd the way, with him coming out saying this. Like you said, he walked out on the team on the last day of the season in '04. Things have been pretty much odd since then. And this even happened. Let's not forget, when we talk about odd behavior, this goes back to the home run race. He was getting ticked off because he wasn't getting the same praise and everything like McGwire got when Sosa hit 62 homers. But Sammy, Mark beat you to it. 62 is a great number, but Mark hit it first. So, he's always kind of looked for – I think he's always had this – at least it seems that he's had this idea that he gets slighted in so many things. And I think it's kind of obvious, not getting into the steroid discussion, but if he's taking steroids because he wanted to have people noticing what he was, getting praise, kind of garnering all this, positive press about him and what he can do, similar to why you said you think Barry Bonds began using when he already had Hall of Fame numbers. He has managed to talk his way out of any kind of long-term respectful relationship with a club that, he was, as he said, he was the staple of in the 90s. He was kind of what made the Cubbies at least somewhat kind of sort of matter in the 90s until you had '03, then the Bartman thing happened, and then it became irrelevant again for the next, decade. So his comments to me are senseless. They have no bearing on what's going on. He is in no way a comparison to Jesus Christ. If people talk crap about you, it's probably because there's some pretty worthwhile things to say, like it or not. So, well, Chris, I see you laughing, and even after we already had our facepalm moment, you're continually facepalming. So as we kind of get ready to break away from this.
Wait a minute. Let's not just focus on the alleged, I guess, performance-enhancing drug use of Sammy Sosa. Sammy Sosa is also one of the players in history who has been ejected from the game for using a corked bat. He probably used PEDs. Yeah, his batting practice bat that he used in a game, got ejected in 2003 for using a corked bat against the Tampa Bay Rays in '03. So Sammy Sosa probably was a cheater. And whether he used a cork bat on purpose or whether he rubbed that PED cream into his skin knowingly, only Sammy Sosa knows that. Only Sammy Sosa can sit back and say, no, those were genuine mistakes.
Well, on the bright side, if only God can judge him, then I guess he can judge himself from the statements that he made. So, you know what, Sammy? Judge yourself. Brother, you do you. And we're going to move on quickly because if you guys are like us, I'm already burnt out on Matt Wieters. And that's before the season began. At least now Matt Wieters has a home. He's going to be the nation's capital next.
I'm really going to feel bad if Matt Wieters has like an MVP season this season because I'm not going to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt. I don't care.
Yeah. Like, I mean, he certainly didn't have an MVP off season, but he gets a 1-year deal, guaranteed. It's a 2-year guarantee. He can opt out after this year. He gets $21 million guaranteed, $10.5 million each year, and then they're going to end up putting one of their minor league first basemen on the 60-day DL with a forearm strain. The one thing that I do want to touch on, because we talked about a lot of things of where we thought it would make sense for him to go, but you surprisingly weren't as high up on this signing as I kind of expected that you would be. So I'm curious, kind of what had you so blah, if you will, about Matt Wieters being signed by the Washington Nationals?
Well, I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? The Washington Nationals go out in the very beginning of the offseason, they pick up Derek Norris, and you think, okay, well, they picked up Derek Norris. They must see something in Derek Norris that I don't see, or maybe they think he's going to return to the abilities that he had when he was with the Oakland Athletics, and you think that's going to be their everyday catcher. Derek Norris is the heavier bat, the more consistent bat than Matt Wieters, but I guess from a defensive standpoint, maybe this makes sense. I don't know. I think Derek Wieters might even have him edged as a defensive player.
You mean Matt Wieters? I'm not. Is Derek Wieters like Matt's brother, or I'm not sure. I just heard Derek Wieters, and it kind of made me do a double take.
Listen,
it's been a long day for both of us.
Wieters may have Derek Norris edged as a defensive catcher. I'm not sure. Some of that stuff is subjective.
And I get what you're saying. I mean, the problem is you sign a guy who, he's had one season where he hit 270. Everything else has been 250 or below. Problem is last year in 125 games, Norris hit 186 with a 583. Let that sink in. A 583 OPS. He struck out 139 times, and he walked 36 times. He's not a power guy. 14 dingers is his career high, and hit that each of the last two seasons. Only had 42 ribbies last year. With Matt Wieters, you get a guy who does not strike out a lot. He has two seasons where he actually has struck out over 100 times. Now, granted, to be fair, in 14 and 15, he played just over 100 games in those two seasons combined. But last year in 124 games, so a pretty fair sample size comparison between these two guys. Now, teams were much better, obviously, in the AL East than they were in the NL West. They were, as far as these two players' respective teams. But Wieters hit 243 and a 711 OPS. So, he's not horrible. 17 dingers. So both guys, power-wise, Norris is a guy who, if he does what he did again last year and can't come back to form, then you have just a paperweight, for lack of a better term, a dust collector on the pine pony in the dugout. Now, you talk about, at least you have a guy with Wieters who has postseason experience. It's a good thing. When it comes to fielding, Wieters has made 45 errors in his career behind the plate, and you got 30 errors for Derek Norris. So, they both field their position relatively well. Norris has been an all-star 2 times. So, you've got a guy when you're picking up Matt Wieters and you've got, 1, 2, 3, almost 9. I'm sorry, not 9. I'm looking at the wrong thing. But he's got 4 all-star game appearances and 2 Gold Gloves. It makes sense. I mean, you're not having to, you got a 2-year deal. He can opt out if he's not happy. You're still loaded up on people. If he had the ability to move around. I don't know what Derek Norris's contract wording is in there, but I'm pretty sure that they have right now. The Nats have 4 catchers on the roster. They're going to at least move one down. I would think that you'll end up having Wieters and Norris. Norris will probably be a guy they try to move somewhere during the year to get something back for him, because you're not going to have 2 starters on the same team. No one's going to be happy. It's going to cause a rift in there somewhere, and I don't think Dusty Baker is going to want that on a team that needs to make a deep playoff run this year. You got to hope Strasburg is healthy. You got a good guy to catch for him. They need the chips to fall their way this year in D.C.
Yeah, I guess where this doesn't make sense for me is on the part of Matt Wieters, because he had an opportunity, probably several opportunities, but he had definitely an opportunity to go to Tampa Bay, where he probably would have taken over the day-to-day operations as catcher. But I don't understand. Derek Norris is no slouch behind the plate. He's definitely a first-string catcher. And that makes me, I guess, just wonder what Wieters is thinking. Does he not want to catch every day? Is he not going to catch every day? I mean, are we talking about a guy who only wants to play 80 games, 90 games? I mean, I guess it doesn't make sense from a guy from a standpoint of why is he getting $21 million to most likely split appearances with another guy?
I don't think he's going to split. I would be surprised to see him split unless you have Norris and maybe they each develop chemistry with one guy, kind of like the way that it used to be with Greg Maddux. Javi Lopez was usually was the catcher for the Braves staff in the 90s. Eddie Perez was kind of Greg Maddox's personal catcher. To make it, I guess, something that means more to our younger listeners would be last year. David Ross was signed by the Cubs because of John Lester. Lester had a relationship with David Ross. He felt comfortable with Rossi behind the plate. That's why he was there. So maybe it comes out this way, but you got Jose Lobaton, Pedro Severino, Derek Norris, and Matt Wieters. Three guys who have had plenty of time up in the bigs in Lobaton, Wieters, and Norris. And, Lobaton has gotten used to playing. I mean, he's played 100 games one time in his career. Everything else has been, 60s or below, 69, 66, 44. So Lobaton's a guy who's going to probably sit behind there and just take reps when you need a day off. The whole idea of having Derek Norris, to me, like I said, he is going to end up, I believe, being a trade piece. Either Wieters or Norris, depending on who performs better. But to me, Matt Wieters is going to give you he's going to give you more long term. I think he's a piece that will fit there, especially with the staff that they have. And it just makes sense for me that if you're going to sign him, you keep him. He's 30 years old. Norris is 28. Wieters is still pretty much in the prime of his career. The one thing you got to worry is how is he going to frame pitches. You have guys like Scherzer and Strauss who are guys who love to have movement with the command, with the velocity. Wieters have to be back there and actually be able to work that umpire to steal those pitches, to get those calls, those close calls that Scherzer and Strasburg and Roark and those guys are going to want. So I think spring training is going to be very telling for that ball club, and I really wish they were closer to me when they were just 10 minutes down the road instead of moving 3 hours further south.
Well, I can tell you that neither Derek Norris nor Matt Wieters is going to be able to help any of the teams that we're about to talk about today. Guys, today we're finally going to get through the National League Central for the most part. Again, we've decided that we're going to take a day and we're going to dedicate it to the Cleveland Indians and the Chicago Cubs as the reigning National and American League champions, and of course the Cubs World Series champions. So we're not going to talk about them, but today we are going to talk about the Reds, the Pirates, the Brew Crew, and of course the Cardinals. And just to really kind of jump into it, let's talk about Cincinnati because I know usually we have sort of an order, but I really want to talk about the Reds because it seems to me like the Reds haven't really done anything major to improve their lot in life. I don't know about you, but it feels to me like they haven't done anything this offseason, or I haven't really heard about them doing anything this offseason, at least nothing that's really going to...
That's the key. The biggest thing that I think they did was allowing Brandon Phillips to be acquired by the Atlanta Braves. Let's be honest, they're hampered by Joey Votto's contract. It's a hefty contract. He's owed a lot of money, and he's aging. 33 years old, still swings a mean stick, played 158 games. The last 2 years, he's had one season where he actually played a full season, but I mean, the bulk of his career, he only has one real season aside from his first year in 2007. In 2014, he only played 62 games. Everything else has been at 110 games or above. So the guy knows, the guy can play. He's a great player. There's no doubt. But at the end of the day, man, I mean, like you said, we had the All-Star game in Cincy, 2 years ago. Todd Frazier was there. They were starting off on a decent run. Thought there was a chance maybe they could actually, push something across, maybe make the playoffs, and they tapered off. Trading Todd Frazier kind of broke the whole thing down. The problem right now is you've got Joey Votto under contract until he is 40 years old. 7 more years, 2024. I'm going to go ahead and give you. What he's owed from 18, 19, 20, all the way to 2023. $25 million per year, with a $20 million team option or a $7 million buyout. So at best, he's under contract until he is 39 years old. So you mortgaged, and we talk about, we throw this around a lot of mortgaging the franchise, but normally we say that when it's based on the idea of trading a bunch of pieces for a win now mentality. Because in sports, it's what it is. As much as you want to have a window open long term, like probably the best thing we have to say is probably the New England Patriots is a team that has had sustained success for a decade and a half. But in most sports, it's going to be if you got something young and you can get something good for it to make a run, you do it. So they mortgaged all that on Votto, and everything kind of fell off. You had Houston Street as a pitcher. He's not there anymore. They re-signed Bronson Arroyo, which is kind of, to me, more of just a, man, you've had a rough go of it. You've been here. Come on back. Let's see if you have anything left in the tank. But you're right. They haven't made any moves to really get themselves set up for a run in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Billy Hamilton is probably, the biggest piece we always know because of his speed. And yeah, you know what? Speed may not go into a slump, but the problem with Billy Hamilton is his bat is normally one big, icicle. It's not very hot. If he can get on base, great. But the problem is, can he get on base by swinging the stick? And that normally is not how it happens.
Right. And I mean, we're talking about a guy who just can't seem to get on base. Career .297 on base percentage. Abysmally low in 2015 at .274, a decent jump in 2016 at .321, but we're still talking about a guy who's hitting .260. He's hit 94 home runs in his entire career. In 2014, he's 94 RBI in his entire career. He has 13 home runs in his career, and last year he had 3 dingers. He's obviously not a power guy. The problem is, he's not just not a power guy. He's also not a hitter. He's got horrible plate discipline, strikes out 3 times as much as he walks. It's just, this is something you're going to see from Billy Hamilton. Yeah, it's great to have a guy who's fast, but if that guy can't get on base, his speed means nothing. And
well, you bring that up with Hamilton, but I want to ask you something, and normally I would hit the siren on this, but I'm bringing this up. How about a guy who's striking out, and now this is one of his partners in the outfield, strikes out four times as many times as he walks. But Adam Duvall, a guy who had a cup of coffee in San Fran, so I'm sure you know who he is, played 150 games last year, 41 walks, 164 strikeouts, but he also hit 33 dingers, drove in 103, but only had a .241 batting average and a .498 slugging. So with a guy like Adam Duvall, where he's relatively young, he's 28 years old, so kind of in whatever the prime of his career is going to be, was an 11th round pick by your Giants in 2010. I don't know how much you paid attention to him because he wasn't up with San Fran very long in 2014. But I mean, is he a piece that could at least be something? I know he's going to be a guy who swings for the fences when he connects. They go, as we can see by those 33 home runs. But man, he's certainly not a disciplined guy. He's going to strike out. He's going to be that liability at the plate where if you can get him, ahead, if you can get ahead in the count on him and make him kind of guess or have to play, defensive batting, you're probably going to win that, obviously, 75% of the time.
Right. And so, to be honest with you, no, I don't think he's a guy that's going to really help the Reds get over any kind of hump. It just seems to me like the Reds didn't do anything this year. And that guy, I just don't see great 33 home runs. I just don't see him being the guy that's going to do anything to help this team. Joey Votto's not going to be that guy. I doubt Billy Hamilton's going to end up being that guy. And they've had interest in other guys in other position guys that might have helped them that they sort of lost out on. But really, I think what hurt them is they went after Jared Weaver this offseason, and they missed pretty badly. He signed with the Padres instead. And Jared Weaver's not like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Jared Weaver is going to be the end of all their troubles. He's a guy who's had a 5.06 ERA last season, but he's still a 500 pitcher. Won 12, lost 12 with the Angels last year. Struck out 103, went 178 innings. He gave up 37 dingers himself, but at least he would have been somebody to add into that rotation, and he probably would have been a number 3 or number 4 in that rotation. But that rotation, speaking of which, is, in my opinion, leaves a lot to be desired. Let me ask, I want to know what your initial thoughts are when you hear these 3 names, okay? Anthony DeSclafani, Scott Feldman, and Brandon Finnegan.
Well, my initial reaction is that Homer Bailey, who is the guy who the Reds spent a ton of money on to be that number 1 starter, is on the DL because of elbow surgery.
Right.
He's owed for the next 3 seasons $21 million, $23 million, and a mutual option of $25 million in 2020. And looking at what his numbers have been, they haven't been what he hasn't earned the money he's been paid. Okay, he has 3 winning seasons. If you count 2007 and when he went 4-2, but 8-5, 9-7, 13-10, 9-5. Those are his winning seasons. He's 60-54 in his career. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that the guy you spent all this money on, he's not there. Now, DeSclafani is a guy who, I've heard the name. I watched him pitch a little bit. Was decent last year. 2-2 with Miami in 2014. Last year actually went 9-5. 3.28 ERA in 20 games, not too shabby. Had a shutout, had a complete game. Allowed 45 earned runs, gave up 16 homers, walked 30, and struck out 105. So, a 1.2 WHIP, not great, but I think DeSclafani's he can hold his place. He's 26 years old, so if you can put him with a pitching coach, someone who can develop him and he can find that rhythm and get somewhere comfortable and be a mainstay there, I don't think DeSclafani is the worst thing in the world that can happen to your franchise. The rest of them, no. Finnegan, Feldman, Bailey's really who you're hoping for, but it just depends. Finnegan's 23 years old, man. He went 10-11 last year, had an ERA of almost 4, but again, he's 23 years old. So if you've got a guy who's that young who can really move the ball, 172 innings last year. If you can bring that ERA down to kind of where it was in 2015 when he had a cup of coffee up there with the Royals, he went 3-0 and 24 innings pitched, a sub-3 ERA. And he walked 13, struck out 21. So he's a guy who tends to strike out usually twice as many guys as he walks. So he's more of a contact pitcher, but he's young. So if you can lock this kid up, if you can get DeSclafani to be a decent pitcher, as I don't think they're going to re-sign Bailey. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. They're not names that jump off the page at you. But then again, the Reds are also in a market where you're not going to see them all the time either. So you're going to hear these names that if they've been there for a while and they pitch decent, unless you're watching ESPN or you're watching MLB Network, you're not going to see a bunch of stuff. Votto's going to be the biggest name on that roster. That's how it's going to stay until for the next 7 years. But I think they have a decent ability to grow a pitching staff. I just don't know if they have enough things to put around them to pick up those young pitchers when they struggle. That's more my concern.
Yeah, I guess underwhelmed is the phrase that comes to mind when I think of those three names. When I think of the Reds pitching staff in general, you don't have a guy in that trifecta with an ERA under 3. In fact, you're hard pressed to find a guy with an ERA under 3.5. And the unfortunate truth is that when all your starting pitchers are giving up runs like that, you just can't win ball games.
They did sign Drew Storen, though, so we saw him he was strong with the Nationals, but I brought in Papelbon. Papelbon, again, I don't know the guy, but when he came in, and he's a firebrand, he is what he is. Obviously his best years were in Boston, but that to me changed the whole chemistry of that bullpen in D.C. But Storen's a guy who I think can be a nice near end of the game piece to these guys, maybe even a closer. They don't have a closer yet solidified for this club this year. You might see Storen, who's a veteran, come in there and have, so at least then you can turn to something. Brian Price is a good manager. He's respected by a lot of guys in the game. If you can give him the pieces to work with and you can kind of begin to get those pieces to gel together, let's be honest, at the end of the day, the Reds play in a division with the Cardinals, the Pirates, and the Cubs. So as bad as they want to be contenders and they want to be relevant, them along with the Milwaukee Brewers, it's going to be a long time before they can legitimately and consistently be a relevant force in the National League Central, man.
Yeah, no, I agree. Speaking of which, speaking of the Pirates, what's going on in Pittsburgh, man?
Well, Andrew McCutchen's moving to right field.
Yeah. Sterling Marte is going to end up playing center. I don't like the move. I don't know that you like the move. And I think it all comes down to the idea that for whatever reason, be it age or karma or the story of Samson, something happened to Andrew McCutchen. But
if you want to know, you ask kind of what my feeling is. Honestly, my feeling is that Andrew McCutchen needs to be traded. And guys, if you're Pirates fans, get it, and you can send all the hate you want at OO Left Field on Twitter, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham on Facebook, as well as the Out of Left Field baseball community there as well. And I'm not saying trade McCutchen because he can't play. I'm saying trade him because it's pretty clear to me, and I think the majority of people from the outside looking into this ball club, they don't respect Andrew McCutchen. He got moved. He wasn't even asked about it. They were dangling him as a trade piece, which we touched on a couple of months ago when the offseason began and going through winter meetings. There was talk that he was going to try and go to the Nationals. The Nats couldn't work a deal out. They pick up Adam Eaton instead from the White Sox. I think McCutchen needs to go somewhere where he can at least have a chance with a contender to play in October. Clint Hurdle went to high school just down the road from where I live. I do games there. He comes down for a golf tournament every year to help raise money. And he's a good manager. But if you notice, it always seems like Clint Hurdle ends up falling one piece short. But it's never the same piece every year. One year it's the rotation. Then we had the one where McCutchen couldn't hit, he couldn't field, he just looked lost in center field. He had he had a down season. I'm not saying that everyone has one, Then, okay, now it's the bullpen. You have a guy like Mark Melancon. You trade Mark Melancon to the Nationals. Now he's in San Francisco. Happy Chris, doing this happy dance over there. Okay. You have Marte, a young kid in center, which is fine. You want a guy that has the best legs possible to be able to move around and cover the most area in that expansive outfield. But it just never seems like they can get, nothing ever seems to want to come together at the same time. The one piece they picked up last year, which I think both you and I were surprised at and could bode well for them, was the pickup of Ivan Nova from the Yankees. He was done in New York. It wasn't working out. It was time for change of scenery. And he came to Pittsburgh, and he actually didn't pitch too shabby. So, the guy's 30 years old, so he's not way past it. But he went 5-2, just over a 3 ERA. He was hitting almost 5 at Yankee Stadium. 64 innings pitched, gave up 4 dingers. He walked 3. He struck out 52. A 1.1 whip in Pittsburgh. So to me, he found something he likes there. He's not in the, what is the Big Apple, that media scrum, that circus where you're just, the lights are on you 24/7. He's a piece who, at his age, not going to be a number one starter. That's what Garrett Cole is there for. He's 26. He's going to be your number one guy for quite a while. But he went 7-10 last year in Pittsburgh. Quite a ways off from the 19-8 season he had in 2015. So, not saying he's going to push Cole to that number one slot. There's no way that Clint Hurdle is going to take the ball out of Cole's hand on opening day unless he gets injured, in my opinion. But I think Nova's a nice piece. I just don't think they have enough to compete with the Cubbies. And the Cardinals are like Spurs, as I said, of Major League Baseball. They do things the right way. They do it the Cardinal way. And they're going to be back this year. And I think they're going to give the Cubs a much harder run, because now that they've done it once, doing it again is going to be the harder thing.
Were the San Antonio Spurs convicted of cheating? Did I miss something?
No.
Did the San Antonio Spurs hack the LA Lakers or something? Or did I miss that?
Why in the God's name do you want to hack the LA Lakers?
Well, they're
just because Magic Johnson's running it. Come on.
Why would you want to hack the Houston Astros?
Well, to be fair, what I had read is that they had the Cardinals had made a claim that they were hacked first, and it was coming back around. Regardless, end of the day, that really holds no bearing because you're hacking. Yes, but they're also hacking a team who's not in your league. Regardless, I mean, I'm talking about your day-to-day operations of Mike Matheny and on down. Mike Matheny is an old-school player, was a hard-nosed catcher, got concussed too many times and had to retire, which was unfortunate because he was a damn good player. He and Jim Edmonds kind of, the anchor that older Cardinals team, but they are. The Cardinals are a great team, and I'm not trying to jump away from the Pirates, but kind of like you said, man, Gregory Polanco, a young piece in left field, kid's 25 years old. He's healthy. He's playing 153, 144 games. He's hitting in the mid-250s. What I'm noticing is there aren't a lot of guys anymore who are hitting 300 or hitting close to that. A lot of, it's all about power. Chicks dig the long ball, and that's great, but they're getting away from those guys, from those power or from those contact guys who can get on base and can move around. That's what worries me. I think John Jaso and David Freese, they'll have, some veteran guys. Freese, obviously a clutch hitter. I know you hate the term clutch, but, had that great World Series run with the Cardinals back in, I think it was 2011 against the Rangers. He and John Jaso both are with the Pirates now, so they have some veteran presence there. Francisco Cervelli is a solid catcher. He's not great, but he's solid. They'll probably finish third, just as they did this past year. There's just so much good play right now in the National League. I don't think it's going to be enough for them to make a run at the wild card, and there's no way in hell that I'm putting them on top of my list in the NL Central this year.
No, absolutely not. The only thing that's even keeping them viable at any time, the only reason, in my opinion, that they keep going as far as they do, making runs at the postseason, getting close at the end of the season, is because they do have that strong core of hitters, guys whose names you associate with being able to hit the ball, like you were saying, Andrew McCutcheon, Starling Marte, Gregory Polanco, Francisco Cervelli, John Jaso, David Freese, Josh Harrison, Chris Stewart. These are all guys that can hit the ball. And having guys like that, having a core group of guys who can hit the ball or who can play well is really what's keeping their head above the water. But the problem is that they're not putting any of this stuff together in a workable way. It's not melding. They only have a couple of open spots for spring training, a couple of open positions, first base, third base. We're all kind of wondering who's going to play third base. I think that the guy that I think that has the most chance of playing ending up at third base is a guy named Adam Frazier, who came up last year, played 66 games, did pretty well, hit .301, on base at .356, smacked a couple home runs, drove in about 11. Has a little bit of an issue with plate discipline, something you really kind of expect to see from a 25-year-old kid coming into the major leagues for the first time. But if he can keep that sort of pace going, then I think we're going to see probably their new starting third baseman. But that kind of moves us into another team that probably has no shot at competing next year. And if you're a fan of the Brewers, I apologize, but the facts are facts. The Brew Crew has in the past been, I don't want to say a great team, but they've been a team, right? They've been a good team.
They were solid. I mean, they had that run in the NLCS with Fielder and Braun, and that was kind of the one heyday season they had. And then, you're left seeing Braun and Fielder hug it out like, hey, man, nice knowing you. I'm out.
Right. And they really saved the franchise with that one. There had been some talks about moving the Brewers. Milwaukee really got behind them. And I think that run in the NLCS kind of saved Milwaukee's keeping Brewers. But it is interesting to me that the Brewers are going into talks to extend Jonathan Villar. Jonathan Villar is a pretty heavy bat, not a traditional power hitter, but he's a good on base guy at .369. He's a good batting average guy at .285 last year. Slugged .826. Those are good numbers. That's a good shortstop is hitting that way. But they're going into contract negotiations with him to extend him, and I think that at 25 years old, about to turn 26, and only 4 years in the majors, I think that this is a guy, more so than Ryan Braun, that the Brewers are going to be able to look at and say, well, he may not hit 40 home runs a season, and he may not he may not walk quite as many times as he strikes out, which it's about 70% strikeout to walk ratio. But he's fast. He's a great shortstop. He's a great middle infielder. And he steals a whole bunch of bases. The guy's 62 stolen bases last season, only got caught stealing 18 times. I think he's a guy that they can look at, that they can build on. Those are the kind of guys that the Brewers want to bring in and try to keep. Not guys, again, I'm sorry, Brewers fans, not guys like Ryan Braun. Ryan Braun's getting old. He's going to be 34 this year.
Under contract till he's 37.
Yeah, he's under contract for a further 3 years. He's going to make a ridiculous amount of money, and we all know the problems that he's had with performance-enhancing drugs. Did they help him? Absolutely. He's a career 304 hitter, career 367 on base, career OPS of 910. Great. But how much of that is Ryan Braun? How much of that is not Ryan Braun? You know what I mean?
No, exactly.
Yes,
and let's
he
be
hits
honest.
30 home runs a year.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest. Braun was dangled in trade discussions last year. We thought he might end up going to San Francisco. That was something that we talked about. What your thought was, is just from a fan perspective. But you trade. Wow, I just completely went brain dead. Help me out. The catcher now for the Rangers who.
McCann.
No, for the Rangers that declined the trade last year. It'll come to me in a second.
Right.
Yeah. So help me out with the name if you can, because I feel like an absolute fool. But you trade him, and obviously he declines an option for the Indians, which he said he doesn't regret. I would be surprised if you don't. But right now, your number one pitcher, Lucroy. Thank you. Your number one pitcher is a guy named Junior Guerra. He's 32 years old, and this is his third season. He pitched with the White Sox in 15, in 3 games. 20 games last year with the Brew Crew, 9-3, a 2.81 ERA, solid, 1.13 WHIP. No problem there. That's good stuff. But he's 32 years old. Now you mentioned Ryan Braun, and that's the big problem is $20 million this year. I'm sorry. $20 million this year, $20 million next year, 19 mil, 17 mil, and then a 15 million mutual option with a $4 million buyout in 21. So he's not cheap, but he still has a decent stick. You're not going to be able to build around Ryan Braun. He's on the way down, okay? He is right now probably in between second and third, the way his career goes. I agree. Villar is the guy that makes sense, but they need pieces around there. You have Naftali Feliz in the bullpen. He's 28. He's been solid. Was very solid with Texas. Problem is, after Texas, it kind of came off the rails. He kind of came unhinged in 2015. Ended up with a 6.38 ERA after having a sub-2 ERA. In 2014, a sub-3. I mean, a good bullpen piece. Was solid last year for Pittsburgh. So I like the pickup there, and it's great to have a piece in your bullpen. The problem is, do you have enough pieces on the field to make Naftali Feliz usable? It's the whole reason the Braves traded Craig Kimbrell 5 or 6 years ago, was they didn't have the pieces in there to really make Craig Kimbrell useful for what he was there to do. You had plenty of trade value, so you get rid of him. So Villar is going to be that piece. You need to get younger in the rotation. Right now, Zach Davies is a young kid. He's 24 years old. Had an 11-7 year last year. Problem is, it was a 397 earned run average. Bring that down. That's the only thing that you need to do is, he's solid, but just need to bring the ERA down into probably a low to mid 3. Get away from that number 4, from that 4+ area. But guys like Matt Garza, who's been around forever, they just need to get younger when it comes to that rotation. It's going to be a while. There's no question. The Brewers' high A team was just down the road until they moved this year. I did not see a lot of good talent coming through there, at least at that level. There are guys, you kind of see it, they've got what it is. There wasn't a ton. Again, maybe they're fortunate. Maybe they're in Huntsville, where you and I went and watched the Huntsville Stars. That was the Brewers' Double-A team,
right?
And that's where. So when you and I were at Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, that's who we got to go see a couple of times here and there. Which, shout out to those guys. Obviously, it's been 10 years, but thank you all for taking care of the soldiers when Redstone was still a primary training base. We always appreciated it. It was great fun, and they were great to us. But at the end of the day, I can't argue with Villar being the piece that you want to pay the money to and build around. And he has to understand that if he wants to make his money, it's going to be for a team that and for all intents and purposes and for being blunt, may not be able to contend during the lifetime of his contract. It's baseball, man. It is what it is.
Right. And, I understand the Lucroy decision, not wanting to go to the Cleveland Indians. I mean, obviously he says he doesn't regret that now, but I'm sure he does. I'm sure he probably is thinking to himself, well, maybe if I'd been there, that Game 7 would have ended differently. Or maybe it wouldn't even have gone 7.
Right. Exactly.
But in the grand scheme of things, they did pick up a decent option at catcher at Andrew Susac, who I know obviously because he played for the Giants for years behind Buster Posey, and was one of the Giants' top prospects for a long time. He came over in that deal that brought Will Smith to the Giants. But here's the problem: is Andrew Susac gets hurt a lot. He's sidelined more often than he's on the field. Even when he was in the minor leagues, he was just injured repeatedly. And I think the battle at catcher this year between Susac, Bandy, and Pena is going to be a good one this offseason or this spring training season. But I can't see Susac not getting that job unless he can't prove that he's going to stay healthy. But I think that what's really going to be fun to watch about the Brewers is going to be watching this starting rotation try to figure out who's going to be where, who's going to be taking what role, and really who's going to be their number one guy. In my opinion, every spot in the starting rotation is open for this spring training. I mean, I think that Guerra's probably going to get the ball on opening day, and round out Garza, Anderson, Davies, but probably Peralta at the back side of that. But I think every single one of those spots is up for grabs.
I think it makes sense. I don't think you really argue. Guerra makes sense. If he continues to do what he did last year, there's no reason not to throw him on opening day. I can tell you the one thing that we can say for in my opinion, a 100% certainty is that Adam Wainwright will get the ball for the Cardinals on opening day.
Yes. No
question. He has been the workhorse of that franchise for going on 12, 13 seasons. A career Cardinal, went 13-9 last year with the worst ERA of his career, 4.62 in 33 games. Just shy of 200 innings, walked 59, struck out 161. Last year was an off-year for him, and he's getting up there in age. He's 35 years old. But I think similar to what we said with Justin Verlander, and granted Verley's a couple years younger, Wainwright has another year, I think, left in him, hopefully 2. It's going to be a bummer because Chris Carpenter is gone now. Obviously, he's been gone for a couple of years. Wainwright's on the way out. Jaime Garcia is going out of the rotation. Michael Wacha is still there, but we're not seeing the same thing out of him that we did a couple of years ago, when he was taking a no-hitter or a perfect game in, I think, the 8th inning in one of the postseason games. But, like we said, man, they're going to continue to be one of the top teams in the NL Central. And the big reason for that is Dexter Fowler.
I'm going to make a bold prediction here.
Oh, Lord. Hot take alert. Here we go.
Second day of spring training, I'm going to make a bold prediction about the St. Louis Cardinals. I firmly believe that the St. Louis Cardinals will, this year, finish second in the National League Central.
Lord have mercy. I can't imagine who you're going to say finishes first.
I know.
Hot take. You heard it here from Chris Furry. The Cardinals will finish second in the Central. So Dexter
it is
Fowler.
A bold prediction.
Yes. Now, it's going to be a fun race. I think having Dexter Fowler, who obviously comes over from the Cubs, gives them an edge to maybe make it a closer race this year than it was last year. I had a chance to catch up with Mark Mulder a couple of weeks ago when we were at that golf tournament, and he and we talked about umpires and other stuff, but I asked him about Dexter Fowler. Obviously, he pitched for the Cardinals for part of his career, and have a listen to what Mark Mulder thinks about what Dexter Fowler brings to the Cardinals this year.
The other team you played for, the St. Louis Cardinals, had a big signing this offseason in Dexter Fowler. Yeah. They're perennial contenders. Obviously, the NL Central was dominated by the Cubs, as it was most of Major League Baseball all of last season. But what does he bring to that organization to put them back into contention, along with Pittsburgh, to try and dethrone the Chicago Cubs?
Well, I think for Fowler, St. Louis didn't really have a leadoff guy. Matt Carpenter would lead off. They'd switch it up here or there, but Fowler is a leadoff guy. And it fills that one void that they didn't have. I don't know the lineup. It's not going to quite be the same for the Cardinals, but the addition of Fowler gives them that guy. That you heard the Cubs say it all through the playoffs. You go, we go. And that was all on Fowler. When he went, they played well. And I think the Cardinals, they spent their money on him because they're planning on the same thing.
And Chris, how is he not right? It's a leadoff guy, a top-of-the-order guy, someone who can get on base, can allow those guys like Matt Carpenter, Johnny Peralta, Colton Wong to move you around. Yadi Molina is still there. They're looking at, as you said, signing into an extension. He's still one of the best minds behind the plate, and I'm not throwing shade at Buster or anybody else, but he is a guy that you emulate. He's that workhorse. He plays a ton of games, works his tail off, stays stupidly flexible for a big boy. When that leg is all the way at a 90-degree angle, it just makes me go, ow. But, they've got pieces to go ahead and make it work. Lance Lynn needs to come back strong. Walker needs to be what we've seen before. And Adam Wainwright just needs to be Adam Wainwright. That's it. And I think they could potentially make it a real run this year with the Cubs. The Cubs cannot rest on the laurels of the fact that they're wearing World Series championship rings and are hoisting a banner this year to take them back into the postseason.
No, absolutely not. The only problem that I have with Dexter Fowler, with the idea that Dexter Fowler is going to be some answer to the Cardinals' issues, is that Dexter Fowler is a good on-base guy. He's a decent kind of hitter. He's a decent kind of on-base percentage guy, but in individual years, he does well. Career-wise, he's a pretty pedestrian guy as far as a leadoff guy goes. He's a career 268 hitter, career 366 on base, career slugging at 422, and an OPS of 788. Those are pedestrian.
Hasn't broken 20 dingers in any season. He's sitting on 78 for his career, and he's been playing in the big leagues since 2008 when he broke in with the Colorado Rockies. So
what he does do, however, and what he does do well, is he does get extra base hits. I'm talking about a guy who has 72 triples in his career, 195 doubles. The guy is fast enough that when he does hit the ball into the gap, he gets around the bases quick.
When your triple is when you're 6 triples away from tying your career home run total, you've got some wheels. And at his age, where he's 30 years old, that speed's not going to die in the next 3 or 4 years. He's got plenty left in the tank.
Right. And that's where I think Dexter Fowler is going to come in as important, because what the Cardinals are going to need him to do is ramp up the number of bases that he snatches on a season-to-season basis, because he has issues with his plate discipline. He has issues getting caught stealing, he has issues stealing bases. He doesn't do it a whole lot.
Yeah, 127 in his career,
I'd like to see him do it more often because he doesn't get caught very much. I think
no, you're right. 127 career steals, caught stealing 57 times. His highest number was 27 in Colorado. He had 20 in 2015 with the Cubs. But yeah, everything else aside from 3 seasons where he was right near the 20 mark has been 13 and below. So I agree with the guy who has the wheels to get extra base hits. I am surprised that he doesn't use that speed to his advantage to get himself in scoring position more often. And I think Mike Matheny, as a former catcher, will use him like that.
That's exactly what I think. I think that with Matheny's experience, we're gonna start seeing Dexter Fowler take a whole lot more bases. Speaking of catchers, Yadier Molina is going into contract talks with the St. Louis Cardinals about an extension. And I love Yadier Molina. I really do. He's a great catcher. He's a heck of a hitter.
Hall of Famer?
As far as
Hall of Famer?
He's a Hall of Famer. But I don't know that he has a whole lot of time left in Major League Baseball, at least not really enough to start discussing long-term extensions. If they're talking about right, especially behind the dish,
a la Joe Mauer.
If they're talking a year or two, I can see that. But if they're talking 4 or 5 year extension on Yadier Molina when he's going to be 38, 39 years old, he is not going to be catching at 39 years old.
No, the knees go. Well, a little bit of speed he has goes away, and yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Joe Mauer, who his thing is he was kind of the son from the Twin Cities, but he's been playing the outfield and first base for the last 5 or 6 years. Really haven't seen him behind the dish in quite a while. I think a 3-year extension with that third year being probably a mutual option, or at least I think a club option for sure, makes the most sense. A guy who, I mean, hell, he hit 307 last year. First time he broke 300 in 3 years. He missed it in 14 and 15, but a 787 OPS. His power numbers have never been really that good. Only has 3 years which kind of surprised me looking back, because I always thought, Yachty was always kind of that big guy. I'm thinking, okay, all-star, good hitter, but only has 3 years where he broke double digits in home runs. 14, 22, and 12 between 2011 and 2013 in those respective 3 seasons. Everything else has been 2, 8, 6s, 7s, a 4. Nothing great, but you mentioned extra base hits. He had 308 doubles in his career out of 1,593 total base hits. So the guy finds the gap. He cruises in, or rumbles in, whichever way you want to do it, But, yeah, he's that guy who's going to drive you in. He's not going to put it over the wall a lot. But to me, that's not the worst thing in the world. He's striking out. He's struck out. His highest number in his career was last season. Without looking, if you have already looked, tell me. But what do you think that number is?
Well, I know what that number is.
Okay.
But
63.
It's right, exactly. 63 strikeouts. We're talking about a guy with excellent plate discipline.
And that's the highest number of his career from 2004 all the way to 2016. Walked 39 times. In 2009. I just want to go ahead and give this. In 2009, he walked, 50 times? Struck out 39. There have been multiple seasons in his career where he has walked more than he struck out. We aren't talking intentional passes here. He has 45 of those. We're talking working the count, knowing what's coming, knowing the umpire, what you're calling, what you're going to get, expecting what you're going to get, and being able to stay alive and work yourself on base. Right.
We're talking about a guy with a nearly 1-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio for his career. 427 walks to 584 strikeouts. That is what Yadier Molina's value is to this team. He's a disciplined hitter. He's maybe not a power hitter, but the guy's got 1,600 hits in his career. 300 of those for extra bases, 14 of those for extra bases. 422 if you include his 108 home runs.
Yeah, I say 314 actual extra base hits, and then about 422 if he had 108 dingers. But yeah, I mean he's a guy who can move around the yard. He doesn't rest on the laurels of his power, and he slugs 400, which when your career average is 285, that's still pretty solid. I mean, that's 115 points higher. So you trust that when he swings the bat, he's going to move around the base path. It just may not go out of the yard, but it's a guy who's been able to stay within himself. So, long story short, without kind of going on the laurels of him, we'll get into that in the next, probably 6, 7, 8 years. I hope we're still doing the show when he comes up for his enshrinement into Cooperstown, New York. But like you said, I think that a signing makes sense. Carson Kelly is the guy playing behind him. He's 22 years old. Played in 10 games last year, hit 154. But come on, dude, 22. He's younger than both of us by a pretty good chunk. So if you have a young kid who can learn, if he can learn how to do Molina's job without getting the attitude that Yadier Molina has a lot of times, it makes sense because you got a kid who's young, who if you see him as someone who can become that future franchise catcher, you sit him behind him, he learns, he stays quiet, he gets better at hitting, at picking up pitches, working a fantastic pitching staff. And you can keep a veteran catcher there and then still give Kelly some at-bats here and there when you need to give Yachty a break. It makes sense. And as we've seen with Buster Posey working some more of the DH slot when they're playing AL teams in interleague play, I think there may be times where you'll use Yachty Molina as a DH because he can still put the ball around the yard, and you can give a guy more at bats and give Yachty a rest in the knees and everything else.
Yep, I agree. I think that that's probably going to go, probably going to end up being his role in the future is sort of a mentor type hitter who can play DH during interleague games, and probably see him taking more and more time off and letting the young kid behind him come play.
Yeah, and to me, and Matt Carpenter to me is going to be the wild card for this team, man. He had that 1 year in 13 where he hit 318, hit 294 the year prior. Everything else has been in the low 270s. Hit 280, hit low 270s, 284 career hitter, but after that 318 year, it's been 272, 272, and 271. The nice thing is, really, over the last 2 seasons, he played 30 fewer games roughly last year than in 2015. But production-wise, what you're going to get: 272 or a 271 average in both years, 365 on base in 15, 380 last year, and a 505 slugging in each year. So what you're going to get from Matt Carpenter. It's just a matter of can he get back to getting that average about 15, 20 points higher. Can you get back into the 290s? I know they would like to see that. He's a solid piece at first base, but I'm sure they wouldn't complain at that. And then Colton Wong at second, young kid, watched him play last year. He's 26 years old, hit 240 last year, but certainly has the ability to do better. Hit 262 in 2015, and that's what the Cardinals see as I think their future second baseman. And it gives them a good, a solid piece in that middle infield. And as much as you love talking Giants with Crawford and Panic, how important, we both know, really, obviously an umpire too, how important it is to have a good middle infield. And Colton Wong, I think, will be a good piece in that middle infield for the Cardinals for years to come. And then plus, Aledmus Diaz, we talked about him for Rookie of the Year last year. He comes back at age 26. You put him together, they've got good stuff coming, and Diaz has a nice stick to go along with what he can do defensively.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Cardinals are going to do well this year. I don't see
second place. You called it second place.
Right. I just don't see how they can get past the Cubs. the Cubs are just such a dynamic, high-powered offense.
The rotation stays the same. Arrieta's probably pitching for a contract. He got arbitration. Really, it's going to come down to, God forbid, injuries. You got to hope that the Cubs stay healthy, and we'll kind of see where it goes from there. But obviously, we're going to get into them next week. But I think it's pretty clear what we think of the Cubbies. And then really, once we finish next week, man, it's kind of time for our early season picks for who we're going to have going into the postseason. Because in the media, what better thing is there to do than to pick who's going to go to the postseason and the World Series than doing it in the second week of spring freaking training.
That's right. That's the best thing we could possibly do. Guys, it's been a great show. We love coming on every week and talking about baseball and having you guys come on and listen with us. So I'm glad we got to do it one more week. Here's to another week and another slew of stories coming to you straight out of left field.